Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscriptions Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today, we have a special guest, Paul Jarrett, who is the co-founder and CEO of Bulu. Paul, welcome to the show.
Yo, how's it going, man?
It's awesome. It's awesome. Looking forward to it. You and I crossed paths a couple years ago, I think, out at Subscription Show. So it's been a while. So I'm very interested to hear, what you guys got going on over there at Bulu. But let's start back at the beginning for the listeners. Tell us a little bit about the company, how you got it started, and kind of where you guys are at today.
Yeah. I'm switching between my camera and the computer, so if my eyes are all over the place. But
No
yeah, we
worries.
we started officially, I believe it was April 12th of 2012. But before that, I think my wife and I were kicking ideas around December of 2011. And we got started. We kind of always knew that we wanted to do something. We always thought it was going to be an advertising agency because that was our background. And so we're kind of going from agency to agency. And I kind of tell people like we got really tired of selling air, brand and image and all that, which is important for certain companies, right?
Yeah.
But no matter where we worked at, we always ended up, in like new launch of brands, new launch of programs. We're always felt like doing something physical, whether it was guerrilla marketing or working with consumer packaged goods. And so, we worked in New York City, San Francisco, Nebraska. We're from Nebraska, so that's where we started. And, after a while, we were in San Francisco and we were getting a ton of work as freelancers. I mean, we were literally doing like Facebook pages for NFL and Visa, and these projects were coming towards us for like 60K, and we're like, whoa, can we do these things? And
This is
it was
huge.
like it was just this moment of like looking at the work and going like, this is all like social media and e-commerce stuff, right? And then it's kind of like going like, wait a second, most of our career has been, e-commerce, like tried to launch a site in like '04 or something like that. And I don't think either one of us would consider ourselves e-commerce specialists, right? But as time went on, we're living in San Francisco, both working at ad agencies. We both worked on the creative and the account side. Freelance work is coming in, which was cool with our agencies. We're actually getting work from our agencies, to do stuff at night.
Okay. So
And
they were
yeah,
totally cool with that.
yeah. And we just had a lot of wins under our belt when we worked together. Our first job, we worked together. This is my wife and my co-founder,
Mhm.
Stephanie Jarrett. So I just start off by saying we because I don't know a world
Yeah,
without her.
right.
Right. So we were working together at different ad agencies, or maybe I was the client, she was the ad agency, or vice versa. And we're just always working together. And we were running a half marathon in San Francisco, and there was a bunch of samples at the end. And being from Nebraska and now living in San Francisco, I was like, my gosh, they're giving me like a sample of New Balance sneakers, And then I remember milk. I was like grabbing gallons of this like Whole Foods milk. I'm like, this is worth so much money,
This is awesome.
Nebraska kid just like loading up, right? And
Hmm.
so we got home, and I was like, it's just insane that so many stores sample. I worked in consumer packaged goods and for vitamin and supplement company. I said the only way we got people to change flavors was to just sample it in the store, just give it away. But nobody could ever tell me what the ROI on a sample packet was. And we knew it was huge, and we knew it was like in store sampling, all that stuff was huge. And so I just said, we're sitting there all beat up from our half marathon, rifling through our bags, and I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if we could like just get the ROI of one of these, or just get like the email? Like, why didn't they take my email, giving me a pair of shoes? And so that was the nugget of the idea was like, how can we get samples into people's hands at the bare minimum, get an email, but can we actually eventually figure out what the ROI is on it? And so we're searching around and we stumble on a Birchbox, and there's kind of nothing else out there like it. And I remember I Google searched sample box for vitamins and supplements, assuming that it was there. I actually wanted to go sign up for it because I saw Birchbox and I thought, oh, this must be a thing that I'm not aware of, right? Um,
Yep.
which, side note, at the time I was one of the early users of Uber, and I remember it was this junky map. I think it's called Uber Taxi, And I remember I had just got an email from like this startup from the founder, and they were like, "We screwed up" or whatever. And I remember it was like the same day I canceled Uber because I was like, "Oh, this thing's just garbage." I like deleted Uber, and then here we are back at our place after an Uber ride for this junky app, right? And then we're searching online for this sample box, for vitamins and supplements, and it just didn't exist. And my first thought was I misspelled vitamins or supplements, right? And I looked
Hmm.
again and I was like, wait a second. And then I went to Birchbox and I kind of did like this built with tool to see. I was like, oh, wow. Like they're just getting started. I used the history of, I forget what it is, but it's like online history of websites. And I was like, whoa, they just launched. And I was like, this is a super smart idea, right? And so that just kicked off the idea of like Birchbox, but for vitamins and supplements. We really looked to them for inspiration in the model, right? And then we came back and we pitched the idea. We were coming home for the holidays, and we pitched the idea and like our first go around of a pitch in Nebraska, which our plan was to go home for the holidays and pitch and mess up, right? And then
Uh-huh.
back to the valley and like
Then come back.
right?
Yeah.
But our first
Rehearsal.
pitch ever, which is like embarrassing because it was like 48 days after the original idea, we landed like just over $1 million. And I was like, this is crazy. This is lucky. We should take this money and go. And we launched, and our curse was that we did everything that we said we were going to do, and kind of nobody knew what to do with us, right? Because it's like this consumer
Uh-huh.
packaged goods. We have software investors, but we have this like physical thing. Birchbox was kind of in a weird spot. There was no Dollar Shave Club, and they were called sample boxes back then, and nobody
Yeah.
like everybody kind of hated them. They were like gross. They were like I remember somebody said, "Oh, you guys are like the new couponing website," right? Because there's all these.
On living social kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and here I am
Yeah.
thinking like, well, yeah, but all we're really doing is putting like multiple items together and charging as a subscription. That's actually been around forever. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so we did that. We grew to about 500K monthly recurring revenue. We weren't profitable because that wasn't the plan, right? It was just grow, grow, grow. We had the CAC, LTV, all that stuff down. Went to go present and raise more money and just crickets. Just that was a
Wow.
tough lesson for me to learn is you can have the numbers, but you still got to have the story and you have to have the right investors, right? And so we're going back to software, like, kind of seed stage software people, and they're like, what is this? Like, we're not 30 million. Are you crazy? And I'm thinking
Hmm.
warehouse, physical
Right.
items and the market, people are hanging up on me. I remember the worst was I called this person and I used Calendly and I talked to them forever. And finally, the investor goes, so back to this calendar app. And I was like, what? And he's like, the thing that you sent me. I was like, oh my gosh, he thinks I'm Calendly. And he's like, oh, you're not Calendly? I was like, no.
I think
He's like,
that's the
"Yeah,
sell.
no." I was like, oh.
Oh man.
And so yeah, we did that, and we just couldn't kind of get there, and that's on me as a CEO, and that's fine. It was just bad timing, right? And so we looked at what we had. We ended up building pretty much like the LinkedIn.com for consumer packaged goods. It became what's called Range Me. So in our spare time, we built a software. Got lucky on that. We sold it. We sold it for way less than it was worth. We had to sell it to kind of like get by, right? And it did
Right.
us right, and we were happy with it. And then by that time, we just had all these big brands coming to us saying, either we want to acquire you for not a lot of money, or I turned around and said like, hey, can we like build a box for you? And that was when things really took off because we really just laser focused on launching boxes for companies. And we were double and tripling, and things were just, it was all finally working. Then COVID hits. One of the things that we were doing was we were actually selling in store. So that's how we were getting like just crazy numbers, right? We'd sell memberships for subscription boxes in GNC stores. I think we were in Disney for about 3 weeks in all their theme parks with three different boxes, and then COVID hit. Oi.
Oh,
We had a
terrible timing.
Oh man, oh, this is my favorite one. We had two, maybe three with Clorox, two that were going to launch, and it was all about green cleaning and all this new stuff. And they were like, yeah, we're going back to the wipes and like all the harsh chemicals. So like,
Eh,
forget, you're
eh,
like, oh my
They
God,
can't make enough of them, right?
we can't, yeah, we can't, like, we couldn't have picked, and here we were, working with clients that were all diversified, but it was, between the retail channel shutting down and just like a bad luck with the mix of clients. Even Crayola had some licensing issues of in the pandemic, what they could and couldn't do. And so it was rough. I would say that we really sat back and just like listened to the market. And what came back to us was just this influx of fulfillment. And so we said, hey, like we're really good at that fulfillment thing.
Mhm.
It's actually way easier. It's kind of hard to like untrain yourself of working with these multi-billion-dollar brands, right? And so we started taking on pretty straightforward fulfillment work for mostly subscription, direct to consumer, CPG, e-commerce, kitting subscription. That's our very defined sweet spot. And then those clients grew, and now we're adding on like pick and pack, and so like we're right in the midst of how big is our next warehouse that we need, what softwares are going to work. We upgraded all of our systems. So it's weird. It feels like a little bit like day one stuff. Just before we got here, my co-founder and wife and I were sitting here looking at the budget and we're just like, man, that's so many people. Like, how did that, like, how did that happen? Wow.
How did all of this happen? Yeah.
Yeah, and like do we just copy and paste that for like our next warehouse? Like, wait, do we want to grow that fast? So like it's interesting because I would say we've scaled a CPG company. We've scaled and sold like a software. And then we were really working as an innovation team for big brands, and that was great, but it's just a lot of eggs in a couple of baskets. And then now
Mhm.
it's like, really I would say that fulfillment really focused on like SMBs, or we work really well with entrepreneurs because it's like we can just actually talk to them, right?
Yeah. Speak
um
that language. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We had like whenever there's something going south, it's like, well, just pick up the phone and like talk to them like you're talking to me, and it's like, oh, that's most entrepreneurs are wired the same way. So that's what we're
Yeah.
doing. What we're doing. It's been a wild ride. I definitely would say like we really were like, okay, we got this. We're growing crazy, and then boy, that COVID thing, it just was the gift that keeps on giving, right?
Mhm. Well, I'm sure there was like some ups and downs out of that. I'll come back to that in a second. But one
Yeah,
part of the story there that I kind of wanted to come back to and ask another question about. You said the first time when you went out and raised that, pitched it 48 days after coming up with the idea, you know, got $1 million in capital, was able to sell the dream, right?
yeah,
Just got the right people on board.
yeah.
So, what do you think was the difference between that and the second time around when you went out to try to raise that second series of funding and, to use your words, got crickets?
Yeah, when you go the first time, there's nothing, there's no numbers to be subjective about. We're
Hmm.
pulling all the data from, market research, and
Right.
everybody knows the internet will give you what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
And so you can back that. And then the second go around, numbers are subjective, right? And I remember very clearly one of the biggest pain points was we did a lot of deals on Groupon. And here I am looking at Groupon like, oh, that's a $1.28 customer acquisition tool, of which X percent, it was pretty high, like end up becoming subscribers. So it was like, I looked at it as just, I always kind of look at marketing as like every single step. I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to do this one marketing thing and then get
Hmm.
people to sign up. And we look at it very much as like, it could be 20 steps, right? And if you're
Yeah.
still meeting your CAC, like who cares, right? And I think just the word Groupon sent shivers down people's spines. But I was like, look, we've been doing Groupon for like a year, 2 years. We're the biggest seller on Groupon. Groupon's flying us out there. They were like whining and dining us, and I'm like, we could do this all day. And there's a billion coupon sites out there. Like, why can't that be the strategy? And it's
Right.
like, well, you got to focus on the target audience. I'm like, it's the same target audience, So,
Yeah.
I think that was a real big pain point for specifically like software investors, just to go like, why are you getting people through coupon sites, right? And you're like, well, the same females that are gonna sample vitamins, supplements, healthy snacks with the goal of, probably losing or maintaining their weight, that's the same user of coupons, right? And so it's just also very subjective. You just have CapEx. You bring up the word CapEx, and they're like, "Whoa, warehouses for it? Like I've never thought of that before." That you can just feel the call just go, "Boop," So I think mostly it was the numbers are subjective, and I learned like you still have to tell a great story, and you still have to kind of, save the world. Like you have to come with as much emotion and passion as you did the first time with a story. And I think I really failed the second time around, just talking to the wrong investors, leaving the numbers a little bit subjective. I'm very like black and white, right? And I just didn't really have a great story, which is still strange to me. I think I have learned this. If somebody's like, I'm a numbers person, odds are they're probably not, and they're afraid of like they know they make decisions based on emotion. So my flag goes up when somebody's like, I'm a this person, because I'm like, that feels almost like projection, and
Right.
because the reality is 86% of people make decisions based on emotion. So you got to tell a story. You got to tell a story, correctly with the numbers. And, you got to do it all seamlessly without like unintentionally lying or stretching the truth, right? And that's
Yeah.
really hard when you're competing against a lot of other people and, just the things that you hear and say. One other example, real quick, was like our CAC to LTV was pretty straightforward, right? Like money, overhead, like it's kind of an all-in cost for like cost of
Mhm.
acquisition, and lifetime value was like based on historic, right? And then you get in the game and you finally start getting other decks, or there's a point where we're going to acquire some people, or investors might know something that you don't know. And then we learned like some of the other subscription boxes, like their CAC was just like simply, what an email list cost or like whatever. And they weren't counting overhead, they weren't counting like anything else. And then lifetime value is like a projection based on their opinion. And I remember one, they were like, well, a customer is actually somebody that hits our website, which I'm like, that is false, right? And then the
That's
lifetime
an interesting definition.
Right. And then the lifetime value is like, they're gonna spend, I don't know, like $70 once a month for like 8 years. And it was like this LTV was insane. And that took me a really long time to understand that like CAC and LTV are really as you define it and as you defend it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't even think a lot of VCs fully grasp what that means, right?
Yeah.
And it's you got to come at people with the truth, but you have to tell it well. I remember we were just I was talking to this company, and they were a competitor of ours, but we have a good relationship. And I was telling our CFO, I was like, stop putting us against them. Like they're just in a whole nother category of like raising capital and not profitable. Like they're in like startup world, and the CFO was like, well, I think they're profitable. I was like, I don't think they are. And so I just flat out asked the dude on the call, and I said, are you guys profitable? And he said, yes. And he blah, 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 blah. And he said, and so if you remove software and sales from it, then we are indeed profitable. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, okay. So if you
Oh,
remove
okay.
your whole engineering team and your whole sales team, you're profitable. And it was so
Uh-huh.
quick and flawless. Our CFO, I like, it took him a moment to kind of pick up on it. I was like, he said they weren't profitable. He said, well, they said they were, but they just had to remove some. I was like, I think that some meant the entire department, and so, you just learn like startups when you're
Right.
pitching, like,
Mhm.
you're talking to a VC that gets 20 deals a week or whatever, like you have to, in a way, just at least compete in that same orbit or call those people out. And that's
Yeah.
hard. That's like a whole nother game. It's like politicians raising capital while they're trying to like run a city or something like that, right? So,
Yeah. It's funny to hear you say that. It's another example, but I've been in subscription billing and payments now for close to 20 years, and I started on the merchant side. I'd never done that sort of thing before. I came in to do accounting, and I got thrown into doing subscription payments. So we had these ways of measuring our collection rate. How many billings did we send out the door? How many did we collect from them? And what was our pickup rate? All that kind of good stuff. And that was our lingo. Well, I get involved in the industry, going to conferences, and I would say collection rate, and they might call it pay through rate, and another one would call it something else. But we all thought we were talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And then when you take a little bit of time to go down a level and you go, oh, you're talking about cumulative attempts to
Yes.
collect their billing versus each individual attempt. You start hacking it all of these different ways, and there's legitimate ways to look at it in all of those views. But it's so many times we think we're talking the same language, and in fact, we're not.
No,
Right?
exactly. That is like one of my, I don't know, that it's like this thing that even my team knows, like, ooh, you better, be ready. Like if you show them an Excel document and there's like, a word in a column, you better write a note defining what that is.
Yeah.
And before we do anything, like a scorecard or whatever for the team, you better really define what that means because we might need it now, but if we, a couple years from now, we might look back on it and we're going to want to
Hmm.
know what that data set is from. And,
Yeah.
I am the guy in a room with Disney where I'm like, I'm sorry, I think I know, like, I understand, customer acquisition cost, but will you please just define it for me? And, everybody chuckles, or it almost feels like you lose a little credibility, but then, the really smart people in the room, you can see them kind of turn on because they're like, oh, wait, this is, kind of, he's
I
asking.
know why he's asking that question, right? It's not because he doesn't know. He wants to make
Yeah.
sure we're aligned.
My
Yeah.
favorite was, have you ever heard of spins data?
No.
So there's I forget if you Googled spins data, it's some, retail turns, how many products are pulled off the shelf on retail. And I was meeting with their team, so love you spins. This was years and years ago. And they kept referencing, it was a big meeting and they kept referencing spins and everybody was talking about it like it was, like water, like a soda pop or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what spins? And they all like literally audibly looked at me and started laughing. And I was like, I don't know what it is. And they're like, well, it's this. And I was like, no, I don't. And I was like, can you answer? And this guy was like, well, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, yeah, sorry. How about you, ma'am? And she answers. And then they all start kind of looking at each other. And this guy that was like the VP said, I apologize. I don't think any of us actually know the correct definition of spins. And I'm like, literally, the software that you're selling, this giant booth and whatever, like, they don't, it's like a good metric for them and it works and
Uh-huh.
selling it, but like, they don't really know what it means. It's just like a number, right? It's like a 4-star rating, right? I mean, not even that. It's just like this thing that exists that works. It's like a NPS score was just a number, but you had no idea where the data came from or what the question was.
Right.
I can't agree with you more. And I think that's a thing where internally as a startup, especially when you start hiring on, we had a bunch of Walmart people come on and, we're looking at what they're creating and we're like, that's this document that we have. Like it's, don't redo it, please. Right. Like it's,
Reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
but yeah, that's a tough thing to do. We use, where is it at here? I definitely recommend with entrepreneurs to find an operating system, if I can find one here. Well, I got a bunch of books, but it's this EOS Traction. Have you heard of this?
No.
I don't get paid by them. But if you go to eosworldwide.com, it's a little cheesy. It's like it's called Entrepreneurial Operating System. EOSworldwide.com.
Okay.
You can
Check
see
it out.
YouTube videos and stuff like that. But what I do love about it is it's like essentially a playbook. It's like, here's a quick, easy way to run in meetings. Here's your vocabulary. So, we do have people on and we basically say like, here's the books and videos to watch and then hop in the project management tool and it all kind of makes sense a lot quicker. And if we're recruiting and we find somebody that was at a company that ran EOS, it's like just so, I mean, they can literally come in and just be working in like a couple weeks. So there's a couple different systems like that, but yeah, I like EOS because they're like, here's 30 tools, how to grade somebody, how to run a meeting, and then here's the vocabulary, and then here's like, how you run those 30 tools in a row. And yeah, our team, it's funny, they fought it like hell. And then after about a year or two, they're like, yeah, we need to, we have a
Really? Yeah.
consultant that we actually have implement it for us. And they're like, we need to get
Wow. So everybody went through that.
What's up?
Everybody went through that training so that everybody would speak the same language and understand it the
Yep.
say way.
Yep. And
Yeah.
usually, if we get off track a little bit, like we're scaling right now, and we're having like some issues with one of our, it's always like, a person, right? And, if you use this tool and you kind of like, it helps you kind of like backtrack to what they would call the core issue. And, really it just came down to like, oh, wow, like our IMS system really isn't working for this one client, and it's causing all these other things. So instead of three people getting the blame and the solution being more people work harder, more warehouse space,
Mhm.
it actually turns into like, oh, we actually just got to pay $500 a month for this little addition to our IMS to fix it, right? And those problems that could go literally years, you can take care of them and kind of spot them relatively quicker. I also tell people it really removes the like person to person conversation to like, hey, I'm just following the playbook. I'm just following EOS. Don't be mad
Right.
at me. This is the
Yeah.
thing, right? And so that's
Right.
been huge.
Yeah, I can certainly see the benefits of that. I'll definitely check that out. That sounds pretty interesting. Me
Yeah.
and my team have had a number of meetings recently, just kind of retooling some of our processes, mostly around project management. We try to do agile as best we can. If you ever find somebody who actually does 100% agile, let me know, because I've never seen it.
Thank you.
But we do our version of it as everybody else does. But we're kind of going through that tweaking process. But just getting people back together to look at each other and go, okay, we've been doing this. This is what I'm doing, and this is what you're doing, and
Yeah.
how does that align in a way that we can be more efficient going forward? It
Yeah.
helps tremendously.
Yeah.
Those efficiencies go a long way.
It really, people underestimate it. I think they actually have a software, somebody built one called Traction Tools that just kind of takes everything and puts it into a software. But we use EOS, and we have like there's 30 PDFs for the tools, and then we pretty much use Asana. We just kind of copy them over into Asana project management tool, and
Okay.
that thing's been a godsend. We've been with Asana since like day one, and again, we
Really?
don't get paid from we should by now, but man, you
Yeah.
you really can't put a price tag on a good project management tool and just streamline communication. And
Absolutely.
when
Yeah.
things start going a little wonky, I'm like, okay, are we using this? Are we okay? Like we got it. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that in Slack. Like that's a project management thing.
Yeah.
It dies in Slack. I'm like things go to Slack to die. you know, Slack is like, what are you doing for lunch? Not like here's an Excel file.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
At least for us.
So
For us, right?
yeah, no, we're with you too. I mean, Slack is our primary communication tool. We use Jira for project management, so kind of the same thing. But this is a good segue back into COVID, because, certainly for us, those tools became that much more important
Right.
when I'm across the office from you and can walk up to you and have a conversation. You have to communicate through those things, document what needs to be done and what's being done.
Right.
So how have you seen the same? I trust that you have, reliance on those tools, and how have you guys adjusted things as a result of that?
We came to the painful understanding that we were very much like an in-person company. We just did well, hands-on, go into the warehouse. Our office was like 5 minutes from our warehouse, and it took us, I don't know, probably a couple months, and we were just like, what is going on? We're just not seeing each other, or whatever. And so then we're like, well, let's make a, daily 15-minute Zoom in the morning. I mean, we weren't even using Zoom. We were still like messing around with like Blue Jeans and Google Hangouts or whatever. So yeah, I'm the type of guy where like technology doesn't work once and it's going out the window. Like I have zero patience for crappy technology. I will pay thousands of dollars more for 1 second faster on internet. Like
Yeah,
that's
it
the
does what it's supposed to
exaggeration.
do.
I'm just like in our team, it's like they were talking about how cool it was that some company hires on and they're like, here's 2,500, go buy what you need. And I'm like, we literally say unlimited. You know, we hire somebody on, we're like, you want to use your stuff? You want us to buy it? Like, what, you know, just get whatever you need to do your job. And yes, this is the first test of the job, right? Be
Yeah, right, kind of. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And I would say now we're at the point where, um, you know, most people don't want to go back to the office, and we've figured it out. But I think it was, you know, it was just a lot more sporadic communication. You want to text, that's fine. You want to Slack, that's fine. You want to Zoom, that's fine. You want to FaceTime, like it just doesn't matter. What matters is, you know, your tasks and your projects in Asana are getting done. I can definitely tell we're a bit more of a task oriented company now
Mhm.
versus a little bit more overall strategy. And I think that has a lot to do with like when you're in person, you can kind of like grab a few people and talk through strategy.
Right.
And now
Right.
it's like, you know, you pick up the phone
Yeah.
a dozen times and, you know, next thing you know,
Yeah.
it's like, crap, I gotta go pick up the kids from school, you know, like,
Mhm.
and whereas before it was like, oh, hey, everybody's here, or like, let's grab lunch and just talk
Right.
through this thing. So that's
Yeah.
probably been the biggest changes. We're a little too task heavy versus strategy and management, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the exact same way. And you know, when we have you know, when it all happened and we all went remote, we were working, could work fully remote. It felt like we took our in-person culture and just started it doing it through interactions like this, right?
Right.
Where I had just seen you last week, but now okay, we're talking here and that's it's working. Okay, we feel okay. And as time went on, the weeks and then months went by, you felt like that started turning from a personal connection to a transactional interaction of, I need
Right.
something, please give it to me, you know, so I can to the next, right? And the tools facilitate that too, right? Even Slack and project management tools, they're like, all right, here's a project, here's you
Right.
know things that need to be done. You start checking things off. Everybody becomes transactional. So figuring out how to still do that because things need to get done, but
Yeah.
have that human interaction, that strategy, that creativity that happens so much better face to face
Yeah.
is we're still trying to figure it out too.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's doable. I have seen there's some really cool like whiteboard tools where you like put your whiteboard on a wall and then you point a camera at it and like whatever you draw.
Mm-hmm.
Or we all got these remarkable two pads, but everything's still just a little bit clunky, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we'll see. I think the part that you know probably drives me the most nuts is we were definitely way better at keeping our calendars when we were all around, but. I, I'm curious if you have this thing where you like, go to somebody's calendar, they don't have anything going on. You like call, you text, you email, or you send them an invite. Like, where the fuck are they at? Or oops, they're like where the fart are they at, right? And then
Yeah.
like the fourth time, they're like and then like you know the next day they're like, hey, were you trying to get a hold of me? And you're like, well, why was it on your calendar? You know, and
Mm-hmm.
that's probably been the hardest thing for me is you know like just people and most of the time they're like oh I was talking to somebody else right like and you're just like I told our team just butt into Zoom like just make it all open just and then I was thinking like should we just have an open room you know period right
Yeah.
we were even tinkering around a little bit with VR which is mind-blowing but a couple of people got motion sick but some of the
Really.
VR yeah, and we found out, you know, some people just didn't like the idea of like they're in a room with a headset on, and you actually can't see what's going on around the room.
There's a cold room around them.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But you can set up a room and literally have a meeting just like in person, physical, and yeah, that's been almost like I got a glimpse of the future through VR, but then quickly realized like it's not going to work like this. It's going to have to be more like augmented reality because
Mhm.
just kind of putting on something and fully immersing, you know, who's, you know, how do you know the kid isn't going to, you know, throw a football at your groin, right? Which will happen in my house.
Yeah, well, that's true for so many of us.
That's
Yeah.
been pretty wild. Have you ever? I'm sure this is offside, but have you ever tried this Oculus or whatever?
No, no, no. I haven't.
It's like $300 and you can have your desktop in virtual reality and
Wow.
just meetings and stuff, and you're just like
Yeah.
300 but like why are more people not talking about this thing? So it's pretty.
There's not another app that you have to get to go with it, or is that kind of natively you can connect with somebody and kind of hold a
So,
meeting?
so yeah, they can have Oculus or not. It just depends. I mean, Oculus is really like I tell people it's almost like, your phone has an interface and you download apps. Same thing. You put it on.
Yeah.
There's like
Yeah.
Oculus apps, and so, Google's got a couple apps on there for like
Hmm.
creating art, which you can just use as like a whiteboard. Um, Anybody in manufacturing, there's some really, really impressive. You can make CAD drawings with your hands or CAD renderings and just hit a button and you got your 3D whatever you built with clay or whatever in virtual reality. So it's kind of wild. It's
Uh-huh. I'll
the
bet. I'll have to
possibilities
check
are
that.
endless with it.
Uh-huh. For
There are a
sure.
lot of subscriptions on it too.
Are there really?
Yeah, yeah. So like every game, it's like, you know, $10, and then you want to actually keep playing. Got to buy
Yeah.
coins and all that stuff
Of
or
course.
subscription.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Oh,
My kids tell me that all the time. It's free. It's free. And I'm like, it's so not free. Don't tell me it's free. This game is not free.
yep, yep. I got a
Hmm.
5-year-old who he scrubs toilets for gems. So we actually got like plastic gems to represent the gems in his game. And
Really?
so he earns physical money for cleaning toilets, and then he
Mm.
exchanges those for gems, right? And then he has them in a little treasure box. And then when he wants to use the game, I gotta approve him and I take the gems because I'm like, I gotta make sure that connection of, you know,
Yeah.
currency.
Virtual to the
Yeah,
reality is
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I like that. I'm gonna have to give that a shot. I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and my 6-year-old son, he's all about the video games, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's good motivation right there.
Yeah, I think for one of their birthdays for my 5-year-old coming up, they have these debit cards that you can manage. There's
Hmm.
two of
Seen
them
that.
like apps, and they're pretty cool. I mean, you can
Yeah.
set them up. So yeah, all sorts of subscription on those too. Like yeah, it's just pretty fascinating. Like it's almost like if you can think it up, it already is out there, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of subscription, where you guys are sitting, working with, these box clubs, where have you seen things gone kind of in recent years, and where do you see it going to, especially in this post-COVID world, right? We went from everybody going to store to trying to buy as much as they can online and even experimenting with subscription in some cases. Where do you see kind of the next wave there? I mean, we're talking a lot of these days about subscription fatigue and what consumers are going to do once they
Yeah,
realize, oh my gosh, I've got 30 of these now.
yeah,
So curious what that looks like from your perspective.
yeah. I'm pretty bullish on subscriptions. I think I've been, probably before we ever started the company. I remember I was working at a company doing textbooks, and we actually came up with the first textbook rental program, which I was like, it's the same thing as buying and selling textbooks, just set a different way, renting, and we're like a subscription. And I think almost every company that I've worked at, we launched like a membership program, and it's always just been mind blowing to me that it's almost like a given. If you have a customer base, 30% of them are gonna, if you have a decent subscription, they're gonna sign up for it, right? And I think that, not to get too heavy here, but like I really think that as long as that wealth gap between, the uber rich and poor, and that divide keeps occurring, right? And there's those incredible stats where, my parents could work for 3 months and afford a diamond ring, and that same ring would take me like 4 years of work, right? The idea of my dad like saving up a couple months and getting a Camaro, I'm like, that's insane, right? And that's like happening with everything, right? And
Yeah.
as that gap increases, I think, it makes sense. And I think a lot of people are just kind of past even the concept of like, I'm going to pass wealth on to my kid. They're just like, nah, I just got to like get by myself, right?
Survive.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that, subscriptions is like the correct word, but also if you just start looking at things and going like, well, is that a subscription? Really is a mortgage, or is it more of a subscription? And I think when you look at the mechanics of things, and there's just so much commonalities. We say subscription box because it's a marketing word, right? But what is it? Multiple varied items packed together, shipped on some sort of recurring basis. And all of a sudden you go, well, that's like direct mail, right? Like that's you know, toothbrushes going in a plastic case to people who, you know, have some sort of toothbrush membership or whatever is out there that exists, right? And so I think that different ways, membership program, loyalty program, subscription, you know, call it whatever you want. If you look at the mechanics of something being sent to somebody on a repeatable basis at a lower cost, I think as long as that wealth gap increases or it doesn't start moving the other way, I can't imagine a world where that doesn't exist. I mean, I don't want to buy a car. You know, I lease, which sounds insane, I know. But when I start to look at the parts that cost my time, you know, frankly, like what I do for a living, I'm like, yeah, I have zero time to like change a whatever you change now and
Mhm.
like catalytic converter sort of thing, you know, but I'm like rotate my tires or any of the things I'm supposed to do. I'm like, no, that doesn't make
Right.
sense. And you know, I don't even want to
Yeah.
do. I was telling my barber the other day, I'm like, why don't you just get these? You know, if barbers rent chair space, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
why don't you just get these other barbers on a subscription? He's like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I was sitting there in the chair, I had like four different options. And I like literally set him up. I was like, here, just do this. And I recorded
Uh-huh.
the screen and just punch in your credit card. And he's like, that's too complicated. I'm like, you know, no,
It's
they just
really
scan a
not.
QR code and they go, you
Yeah.
know? And so I just
Uh-huh.
can't make out a world where that doesn't happen more and more. I mean, our kids are being bred on these subscriptions on games, you know? So it'll probably like watch, it'll probably be like 30, 40 years and it will swing the other way where people are like, yeah, that was really dumb for everybody to do subscription
Well,
or whatever. But
you're making a really good point there that the macroeconomic environment has a big impact on this.
yeah,
It's not just businesses want to push subscription for the recurring revenue aspects. It's like this actually makes sense for people.
right.
And I think if, especially when you're talking about younger generations who are kind of operating in the way that you just described, which is, okay, I'm focused on something over here. I'm glad to subscribe to something for a monthly fee if I don't have to worry about it
Yeah,
anymore. If it's not like an asset that I have to take care of and nurture, like a car's a great example.
yeah,
Heck, you know, Dyson's tested subscription vacuum cleaners in Japan, right?
right.
But if you think about it, it actually makes a heck of a lot of sense. I just need it
Yep,
to work, and when it doesn't work, I don't want to have to deal with it. You know,
that's the thing,
um,
right? Yep,
yeah, Ford, Volvo, and others, you know, the subscription car business, which in a lot of ways is like a lease, but with more things added to it
yeah,
to make it more comprehensive. But you know, it's going to take time for consumers to kind of come around to that way of thinking to a certain degree too. But if the way that younger generations are behaving is any indication, it
yeah.
is. I agree with you. I think it's going that direction.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would gladly pay Apple an annual fee or a monthly fee or whatever it is if I just always had the new gadgets, right?
Hmm.
Because how does it go now? I buy the newest thing like an idiot, right? And then I do that, and then I got these old devices, and you know, we might use them at work or we might sell them or whatever, but you know, there's always going to be a cell phone laying in a drawer, right? Or like a watch that you know got cracked or whatever. And I'm just like, my God, the amount of money that, you know, we spend on this. Like, why can't we just, you know, what's the difference of leasing business equipment versus leasing, you know, family equipment? Everybody's got TV,
Right.
you know, TV, computer, etc. You know, if I could do that all with one place, like I'm gladly going to do that, right? Especially, I think the important thing is you just got to show people kind of the economics, like the reality of, you know, family gets a computer every 5 years. You know, here's what they spend, and then they got to do this, and then they got to do this, and the cost of data transfer and whatever. Or, you know, just pay us you know, a couple $100 every quarter and never worry about it again, right? Um, yeah, I really, you know, between, I always think of like between more subscription and more e-commerce and you know do I see either one of those going down? Nope, people are going to want more stuff to their door, and when people do that they're going to go, well, why don't I just get this put
Right.
on repeat for a cheaper price, right? I finally drank enough like ready-made protein where I'm like I'm done with the powders, And today on Amazon it pops up, and I'm like, damn you, Amazon, I'm going to say yes, right? And then I can't help myself. I got to do the math, and I'm like, well, I would have saved like $50 over the last year, had I did it that way, right? Yeah, and there's a couple other cool stuff like Magic Spoon. It's like a cereal, like a high protein cereal, and like their model literally won't work in retail. So like that's the other thing that I think people really
Mhm.
are not understanding is like, with retail failing, just that whole buyer method, right? Like you go in front of a retail buyer, you kind of pitch your product. Like people are now starting on Amazon and they're building up a base, and then the buyers are coming at them. And I've watched people on Amazon who are selling like $40 million, and Target or Walgreens, they're begging them to talk to them, and they're like, nah, that seems crazy. I ship you a bunch of product, and if it doesn't work, you ship it back. So yeah, it's just fascinating watching the whole thing turn. COVID really sped it up, which was cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's obvious, right? Even last thing is like even from a financial perspective, once you can watch a CFO grasp what subscription actually means to them. I've worked with those
Mhm.
large companies where the CFO is born and bred like products on a shelf, products off, et cetera. And it's such a cool moment when you watch them click with subscriptions and they see how they can project. They're like, I want that. That makes a lot of sense.
It absolutely is. It is. I've had enough engagements of sitting down with a merchant who is a retailer, right, and they're experimenting with a some subscription offering. Our sister consulting company does a lot in the petroleum space, and you got a lot that are getting into car wash clubs, coffee clubs, all that kind of stuff. And they've been thinking transactional their entire career. So
Right.
when you start talking about subscription, and then you put together this list of, hey, here's just 10 high level things have you thought about? And they go, well, no, 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 not really. No. It's like, what does that mean? It's like it's hard to describe, especially in short order, but it's just a shift in mindset, right?
Yep.
And it takes a lot of doing it and a lot of experience along the way. And fortunately, there's organizations like yourself and ours that are out there that have kind of been there, done that.
Yep.
So in terms of where Bulu steps in, I mean, obviously you guys do the fulfillment side of the house, but given your background, there seems like there's a lot you can do, upstream of that as well to help them put their product together. So where do you guys kind of bookend things?
Yeah, so we're in a position now where we have like a lot of inbound coming in of, we're actually getting a lot of like influencers like YouTube,
Mhm.
like
Okay.
not kind of big, but like really big. And the we will, if a large brand comes to us and says, look, we've been thinking about the subscription box thing. Step one for us is to put together a plan, and which we actually have on our website, so people can kind of go download. There's a template. We have a YouTube video with it. It used to be kind of like our proprietary subscription box plan, but we're just a little bit more of the mindset of like, well, let it out there and see what happens, right?
Mhm.
And when we work with a client, we do a much more detailed kind of layout. And so if a company comes to us, we're not actively going and getting those companies because when they come to us, it's a pretty long process because we got to look at like what are they doing for social media, what are all their assets that they have, and it kind of all gets calculated in. And then we've been able to, I don't think we've ever been more than 10% off. Where if they say they're going to do certain things like put us in X amount of shelves or just ads, send us out an X amount of emails, et cetera, we can kind of project out the model. And I think people are really surprised at that. But after you've done 50 something subscription box type programs over a decade, you learn a thing or two, right?
You know how it's going to go.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's probably, the biggest value, but those are definitely like, big clients, big engagements, long process. And, really since COVID, we're getting a lot of subscription entrepreneurs that they just really, you can tell, want the value of, the same person that might have managed Disney is now working on your account, right? And our team just has so much experience. We have a lot of the same people that launched Bulu Box on day one, who, my Lord, almost 10 years later, now they're helping these subscription boxes. Our clients are like 1 or 2,000 a month. And there's just these little things you pick up, right? And you're like, hey, what's your website conversion and this? And a lot of things people are like, well, yeah, I'll check that out. And we're like, no, it's really easy. Just do this, this, and this, right? And so I think that's, a lot of why we're enjoying what we're doing, working with businesses that the big brands are great, right? But they can throw time and money at problems. What's cool is when you get somebody that's kind of like barely eking by and they just kind of can't get over that like breakthrough point, right? Like there always seems like with CPG, there's like 2000 is like a really tough one to break over. And then for some reason it's 10,000 and then 14,000, then 25,000 per month, right? And so
Mhm.
like, each of those takes a little bit of a like hold your breath and go. And I think to have somebody in our position who can say like, well, let's calculate if the plants will be ready for you to ship at that time, right? Like it's just a lot of hard math, it almost seems like, right? And I think our
Yeah.
team's okay with saying like, well, it's 80% correct. That's enough for us to say yes. Sure, there's a lot of unknowns, but we think it's a pretty good bet, right? And yeah, that's been really cool. And it's the smallest things like when you email people and tell them their shipment's coming or you got their order, just add on like, hey, add a product for, $10, right? Add rewards points, just all these little things that you pick up over the years. Like get yourself on Amazon. Don't worry about actually selling there. It's just good SEO, right? So
Sure.
yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
really cool getting to work with like entrepreneurial type people where you can just talk to the person at the top and it's like change that day, right? Definitely more chaotic because we got shipments coming in, 7 truckloads of something, and we're like, who sent us this? What is this from? Like, is this like bug pesticide? Is this for us? Like, what the hell is this, right? So
Uh,
that's definitely been, kept us on our toes working with entrepreneurs, and we can relate.
well, who is the like in one respect like your ideal client profile,
Yeah.
or what sort of situation would an entrepreneur or business owner find themselves in that should be a good time to reach out to you guys?
Yeah. So we tell people, we're not actively pursuing large multi-billion dollar brands. They're more than welcome to talk to us. Our prices are high for them because, it just takes a while. What we think is high is probably, it's just nothing to them, right? Like, but, those programs are done correctly. We do the creative, we do the research. Honestly, it's hard to tell people in innovation this at big brands, but it's like, hey, if you do what we say, it's gonna work, right? And I remember we had that conversation with somebody, and they said, well, it's got to be $3 million, or it's got to be $10 million in profitable in year three, and we're like, okay. They're like, what do you mean? Okay, well, that's doable. They're like, you haven't even started yet, and we're like, well, yeah, we'll start, but like, it's a really large company, and they had all these assets, and they weren't on track, and we had to fly up there, and we're like, hey, can we like do what we're telling you to do now? Like, because we're catching hell for this, but we're not actually at that level where we're doing what we're telling you to do.
Mhm.
They kind of, threw up their hands and were like, whatever. And, just almost instantly. And I think the thing is like, it's really hard to understand, but, if you do 10 cents more on 10,000 items for somebody and you do that 5 times over in a month, you pay a couple bucks more, you don't ship on time, or, you get something wrong and you just do 10,000 new shipments. I'm like, your money is gone. And you
Right.
didn't need to do that. You did not
Yeah.
need to do that.
Hmm.
You're not Apple, and Apple doesn't even do that, right? And so, those clients are great, but they take a long time. But I'd say for the people that we're servicing now, I say like, look, we are the place to go first in order to get your questions answered. We turn 9 out of 10 people away. Um, but our sales team, I still get on the phone quite a bit because I love talking to entrepreneurs, way too much. But a lot of times people call and they just go like, "How are you getting cheap shipping rates?" Or what are your shipping rates? That's like the number one thing, right? And then we
Right.
just tell them, and then we're like, you can go do it too, or you can benefit off of us. And then usually it's like, well, where do I get my cardboard boxes at? And we're like, well, here's what we do. here's our contact, or you can go through us, right? And then really what you come to find out and is that usually it's like one thing, and then we're always very aware of saying like, hey, if you had a good experience with us, just tell somebody else about us, and we're here to answer your questions, and if it's with us,
Hmm.
great. If not, no big deal, and that really has served us well. But what usually happens in 1 out of 10 calls is that people are like, you kind of just get this feeling. You go, are you just like tired of dealing with this? And they're like, yes. And then you kind of go, did you, it sounds like you really love your product and you didn't really think through this would be as much logistics. And they're like, not really. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't either. Like, when we started Bulu Box, right? There was nobody out there when we were doing fulfillment. We went through 3 firms before we just did it ourselves. And then I
Yourself.
said, like, look, there's going to be a cost up front. Will be more money, but what you're paying with shipping and all of this stuff, once we get integrated, once we get the kinks worked out, you know, after 3 months and, probably a couple extra grand out of your pocket, that sucks. But, you don't have to deal with it. And you're spending 20, 30 hours a week on a good week on it. And if something goes wrong, it just kind of nukes the rest of your month. And,
Yeah.
why not like, give us a try or, one of these other companies. And, I went through the same thing, right? And we acquired a fulfillment firm, and then they were handling it, and we just kept going. There's nobody to do this, and oh crap, we're actually really good at it now, and oh crap, a lot of people are asking us for it now. So I think that is, and I think the other big thing is like you really have to do your homework on who has experience for what you need, right? Like you want relatively the same size. You don't want somebody too small because you might crush them.
Right.
You don't want somebody too big because you'll get lost in the mix. You kind of want to be matching
Yeah.
there. We are very into kitting and subscription. That's a very specialized thing. A lot of people will say they are, they're not really. Um, I tell people we're not the best pick and pack in the world. We're not like the fastest or anything like that. But when it comes to a kit that really has to be specifically done for the customer to open it and be like,
Right.
whoa, look at that. That's
Hmm.
really where we come in, right?
Yeah.
And so I always say like, man, you start getting a couple thousand a month. Um, it's okay to do it in house. 10,000 a month, it starts getting really stressful. You get to 14,000. Now you just have to decide, am I a logistics firm or, actually this product? Because that's really what happens. My example is, um, your website is nothing without like AWS, right? Everybody's always like, it's all about the product in front of the consumer. It's like all about the car and the engine or whatever. I'm like, well, yeah, the car needs gas and the website needs like a server space, right? And like, logistics is where all the money is happening. And, if you really want to focus on your product to the customer, like you really do have to get that part right. And it's also, I'm the first to say, like, it's a commodity and it's like freaking smoke and mirrors. I mean, we'll still talk to other companies about, they'll show us what they got quoted or, we'll have somebody go out and get a quote because sometimes we have overage and we're like, we need to go outsource this to somebody else.
Yeah. Hmm.
And you look at the proposals and you're like, this is awful. Like there is so much hidden stuff in here. You know,
Uh,
$30 pallet storage fees, like, and it is so
yeah.
frustrating. And I know that, when we're on the phone with somebody, that's like a huge battle to overcome and I'm like, yeah, the industry is shady. Cardboard boxes are
Hmm.
shady, all this stuff that's been around, it is shady and it is built to
Yeah.
confuse you.
Yeah.
Let me help you out. Shipping prices, buying, quantities of cardboard ahead of time, and really managing your cash flow and your terms, right? Like those are not fun things to do. Yeah.
That is so synonymous to what we do for payments,
Yeah.
because payment processing is the same crap. They love those agreements that have all these individual fees in them, and they're like, oh, that probably won't apply, or that won't add up. And then you're like, oh my gosh, chargeback fee. I
Yes.
should have negotiated that down from $15 to $5 because, man, I've got to deal with those.
Yep.
So it's things like that. I mean, but you can't blame people for not knowing. They don't know what they don't know, right?
Exactly, right. And we like work a lot with credit card processing and subscription, and it is like, that's that thing where, like, for our bigger clients, like, we'll handle it for them, but like we're not dying to do customer service and manage payment platforms, but there's just sometimes when things get so big, like when you're shipping millions for somebody, you're just like, it just let us do customer service, let us handle this other thing. But you do need the right partners, and we're not building any payment software, although the team wants to. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, that's a whole other thing. No, no, we're not doing
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's it's wild because it's not fulfillment. That's the other thing, is like fulfillment is a terrible description word. Like payments is like a terrible descriptive word. Logistics does a little bit more justice, but there's B2C, B2B, D2C, D2B. There is wholesale, there is e-commerce. Like when you start actually looking at all the different places where things are purchased and shipped and the different ways they're packed or whatever, I mean, you're talking like thousands of different processes. And the fewer things that you can do more correctly, that's going to win. And that's the problem in the logistics arena, particularly in subscription, is marrying these old like .NET systems that were built on individual inventory with something on a phone that's operating with literally a flash of facial recognition, and then getting it
Mm-hmm.
all to go through the payment system, right? And so
Yep.
like it's literally the like APIs and the communication gaps between this technology, and one little
So
thing
true.
goes wrong and the subscription's kind of screwed. And I
Yep.
don't think people
Yep.
realize that until it happens in payments or deliveries, and you're like, oh no, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, this has been a very fun conversation, and I certainly appreciate all of the insights and everything that you've shared today. If any of the listeners want to get in contact with you or learn more about Bulu, where can they go?
Yeah, well, we're at bulugroup.com. I'm easy to find. I'm just Paul at bulugroup.com, or I think you can Google Paul Jarrett. That sounds pretentious as hell, but it's for marketing purposes. So yeah, we're not hard to find, and we got a great team that usually just answers a few questions. And if you're interested, then we'll send you a little questionnaire. But odds are we're going to probably pass you on to the person that makes the most sense for you. But that's not because we don't like you. That's because we want you to like us.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, congrats on all the success of 10 years at Bulu. I agree with you. The subscription future looks very bright. It's a fun industry to be in, and I think we got a long way to go.
And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And thank you, everybody, if you made it this far. If not, still thank you.
Very true, very true. Thanks so much, Paul.